Hi. Well, winter has arrived here in Hickory Hollow. Um, so we've been on the homestead 6 years, and we've tried a lot of things trying to make a homestead produce and make an income from the homestead, and some of them have worked okay, and some of them have been epic failures. It's Wednesday, December 13th, 2017, and it was 12 degrees this morning when I got up. I hate winter, but that's Ohio. Anyway, so what I thought I'd talk about today is successes and failures of the homestead. You know, everybody is looking for a way to make money on their homestead, or at least save money on the homestead, and we're no different. And we've had some great success stories. We're still successful in things we're doing. We have had some things that were okay, and we've had some epic failures that probably lost more money than they ever made. Not probably, they did. So I thought I'd talk about that. So first we'll talk about epic failures, things that we tried, things that we failed at, or they just didn't work. And it wasn't necessarily anything we did wrong or that we failed. They were just not good ideas as it turned out in the end. So anyway, we'll do this in three parts. First, all the epic failures, terrible ideas that I wouldn't do again. And then secondly, we'll do the things that worked okay and we're still doing or may do again. And other great success stories that we'll continue to do and build on. So stay tuned. Okay, so epic failure number one. When we first built the homestead, as probably almost everybody does, we built a chicken coop. And we had chickens in the past over the years, and liked having our own eggs, and thought we could develop a little bit of an income selling eggs at farmers markets or at work locally. And so I think I started with a dozen chickens, and you know, the chicken math took over, and we sold a few eggs, and I took them to work, and I did a little local farmers market downtown, and so yeah, we made a few bucks. We were selling them for about $3 a dozen. And that was not easy to get. And I see on Backyard Chickens people talking they get $4 a dozen. And now you're not going to do that here. And getting $3 a dozen was like pulling hen's teeth. So we thought, well, you know, we do bigger volumes. We can lower the price a little bit, sell more eggs. So we started doing them for $2 a dozen. And then for some reason at the grocery stores, they dropped to like 63 cents a dozen. And people laughed at me at $2 a dozen. And at $2 a dozen, we ended up with 40 chickens. We had a lot of eggs, but at $2 a dozen, you're barely paying for the feed. I can't tell you how many eggs we threw away, gave away, trying to get rid of them. Gave them, you know, everybody in the family had lots of eggs, but the problem is I'm feeding all those chickens, and we lost probably a lot of money on that. So, you know, lesson learned there is, at least in this area where you can't get enough for your eggs, we're going to cut back here. Well, we sold all the chickens right now, and, you know, I had to carry water to them, and I decided, you know what, for winter, I'm just going to back off. In the spring, we're going to get 4 or 5 chickens. We'll have our own eggs. Our feed bill will be 10% of what it was, and life will be good. We'll have plenty of eggs for us, and that's so anyway. That was a big waste of money and an epic failure. Okay, so epic failure number 2. Back to the chickens. When we just couldn't get $3 a dozen, I had this great idea. I said, what if we could get $36 a dozen? Well, how can you get $36 a dozen for eggs? You can hatch them. $3 a piece for the peeps, $36 a dozen. That sounded like a good idea. I'm on to it now. So we started out, when we had the 40 chickens, we had golden buffs. So I sold all the golden buffs. After we got rid of all the golden buffs, I spent all winter driving all over Ohio, Craigslist ads, and I bought like 4 Buff Orpington hens and a Buff Orpington rooster, and 4 or 5 Black Australorp hens and a Black Australorp rooster, and 5 or 6 Rhode Island Red hens and a Rhode Island Red rooster, and barred rocks. We had 5 or 6 barred rock hens and a barred rock rooster. So the coop's in 2 parts, and I let everybody. Well, it's sort of free range. It's a big run. It's like a 50-foot by 50-foot covered run to protect them from predators. But they can pretty much free range in the run, and so they were all out together in that run. But then in the other part of the coop, I would pull like 4 barred rock hens and a barred rock rooster, and collect the eggs after I'd wait a week or so and let them in there, and I'd collect all the eggs from the barred rocks, and I'd collect all the eggs from the put in I'd separate like Rhode Island Reds and a Rhode Island Red rooster, and I could separate them all so they were going to be purebred, collect the eggs. And I built this huge incubator. Well, huge to me. It had 4 egg turners in it. So I could do about 40, 80, about 160 eggs at a time in the incubator. And of course, it takes 21 days to hatch a chicken. And I had a really good hatch rate in an incubator. I probably was getting, out of 160 eggs, I'd get 150 peeps. So put ads on Craigslist and the Facebook buy-sell trade pages, and I sold all the peeps I could hatch at $3 a piece. Looking good. About every 21 days, I'm profiting $350, $400. Well, then the electric bill came. The electric bill had gone from about $80 a month to about $340 a month. I never thought of that. Duh. I'm running the incubator. The incubator took, about 600 watts. And then I had 4 brooders going. They're 250 watts a brooder. There's another 1,000 watts. So between a little bit of heat in the shop, all the brooders, and the incubator, I'm running almost 2,000 watts of power. And so that $350, $400 worth of peeps just paid the electric bill. Then you subtract a little bit of peep feed from while they were in the brooder, and you subtract all the feed for the breeding stock. Wasn't making a dime. that went on. I kept trying to think of ways I reduced the wattage in the brooders a little bit, and so for about 4 months I hatched peeps and sold them all, and I took in, I'll bet, $2,000, 2,300 maybe, in 3 months. Good income for the homestead. If I hadn't spent like 950 of that for electric and another 500 for feed for breed stock and peeps, in 3 months I don't know if I broke even, you know. So that was epic fail number 2. Okay, epic fail number 3. I got into honeybees. Now let me also say, I'm going to do some really success stories, and the honeybees is one of them. But it's also one of the epic fails. So I started out, I joined a local bee club. I got lots of advice, a lot of input. I found out about an Amishman 20 miles from me that sold bees in packages and nooks. Super nice guy, super willing to help out. So I went there. I think I bought my first 2 hives from Eli Troyer, of course. And I bought a package and no, I'll take it back. Back up. Built my first 2 hives, but I built horizontal Langstroths. And if you're into beekeeping, you understand what that is. If you're not, it doesn't matter. So I built those 2 hives, and I bought a nook, and I bought a package. And again, if you don't know anything about bees, that doesn't mean much other than I bought a bunch of bees. So, boy, they thrived, did great. I got them in like April, and by June, the nook was so full, I split that. I built another hive, but this time I built a regular Langstroth hive. So I split the nook, so now I had 3 hives, and boy, this was looking good. So I got back a hold of Eli, but by now it was like late June. Got back a hold of Eli, and I said, hey, you don't have any nooks left over nobody bought, do you? Well, yeah, matter of fact, he had several that they had grown to the point where he put them in hives. They had outgrown a nook box, and he'd sell them for the price of a nook. Well, that was a good deal. I mean, these are full hives. These were 10-frame hives that were ready to have a honey super put on. So I bought 3 more. So now I had 5 hives. I had 6 hives. 6 hives. Boy, just thriving, going great. In the first year, you leave them all the honey, which I did, and I followed all of the advice of the guys in the bee club. Treated when I was supposed to. Treated with the things I was supposed to, according to them. When we had a little bit of what they call dearth, which was no nectar flow or anything, I fed them with sugar water. I gave them treated. I added to the sugar water essential oils that the guys in the club said, boy, this keeps the mites away, and varroa mites is a big issue with honeybees. Anyway, so long story short, too late for that. Things were wonderful right up until, like, well, close the hives up. They're all sealed up for winter. The weather got cold, it started snowing, and they were in for the winter. And then in the spring, first nice warm day, I'm thinking they should be out. Go see how I'm doing. And I went down and I didn't see much activity at all. And it was 55 degrees and sunny. They should be starting to come out. But it was still early enough spring. I didn't want to open those hives because it could get cold again. So I waited. And 2-3 weeks later, we had a 70-degree day. And I said, that's it. I got to see what's going on. Still no activity. I opened 6 hives with 5 pounds of dead bees in the bottom of every hive. Not a living bee amongst them. 5 hives gone. Probably $800 down the tubes. And I still had the hive boxes, so maybe not quite that much, but that was a big loss. So that was an epic fail number 3. And again, that's one of our biggest success stories also. So stay tuned, I'll tell you why. Okay, so now that I have kind of humiliated myself with all the failures, let's talk about some of the things that worked okay. We're sitting on pure clay soil, so we had to put in raised bed gardens, and of course we had the chicken coop to supply us with some good compost, and we composted everything we could. You know, things you normally do, leftover table scraps and the chicken manure and some junk straw and hay and leaves. And a friend of mine has beef cows that when he cleaned out his barn, I got like 6 pickup loads of 2-year-old cow manure from a big pile he had when he cleaned out his barn. And so anyway, we used all that, filled all the raised bed gardens, and we built 6 gardens, and we raised potatoes and carrots and onions and tomatoes and some kale and some leaf lettuce, and that went pretty well. We're not good at preserving. We have a chest freezer, and we froze a lot of vegetables, and we did a little bit of lactose fermenting, and preserved a few things that way, and we raise a lot of our own food. We're nowhere near raising all our food, but all summer long, we have fresh vegetables from the garden, and we have enough preserved and frozen for some vegetable soups, and fresh, well, not fresh, but frozen veggies from all winter long. So we do fair at supplementing the grocery bill and having food that we know where it came from. Because of the honeybees, I don't use any 7 Garden dust or any Roundup or anything like that, which is to our benefit, of course, also. So we have good organic vegetables from our own garden, and that's a semi-success. And I only say semi-success because we're not raising as much of our own food as I would like, and maybe we'll improve on that. So that's semi-success number 1. Okay, so semi-success number 2 is the orchard. And I only say semi-success because it isn't producing that much yet, but it's because it's a young orchard. Um, this past summer, we got our first good batch of peaches. Oh, were they good? Peach pie, and oh, that was good. It was nice having our own good, fresh fruit from the orchard. We still have plum and pear trees that haven't produced yet, but I think this coming summer they're going to start. So we'll have even more of our own fresh fruit, and that's just great. We even have a half dozen quarts of peaches canned for peach pies this winter. We had one at Thanksgiving, and I'm going to probably do another one for Christmas. And it's going to be, I think, a good success. It just isn't there yet. And one thing, again, my hives are right in the orchard, so I can't spray the fruit trees. So what I did discover, the only problem that I really had was a little bit of fungus the very first year the peaches produced, which was a year and a half ago. We got like 4 or 5 peaches on it, and they all got a fungus, and none of them were even edible. And so I read somewhere, I'm going to say probably on the internet, probably a YouTube video, about a plant called horsetail. And lo and behold, in a little spring here on the property, we have horsetail out the kazoo. Probably 1/4 of an acre of horsetail. And it's a plant, Google it, you'll find it. It's a plant that, as it emerges in the spring, it almost looks like a little tiny Christmas tree, a little pine tree coming up. And it's a weird plant, but you cut it off and boil it and make a tea and spray the fruit trees with it, and it's an antifungal. It's also great for infections and putting on wounds. It's a natural sort of antiseptic, antibiotic, antifungal. It's that miracle plant. It worked. We didn't get any fungus on any peaches whatsoever this past summer. So I'll continue to spray all the trees with the horsetail tea, and hope that it continues to work, and that it works on plums and pears as well, because it was great. And again, it's natural. It doesn't hurt the bees. So anyway, so that's semi-success number 2 so far, and hopefully that'll get it put in the big success column. Okay, so let's talk about the big successes. I would say our biggest success, our biggest accomplishment, is this little house we live in. We bought 2.5 acres of land that had absolutely nothing on it. It was an old, partially reclaimed strip mine. There's an old strip mine pond on it, and I'll get to that here at the end. Pure clay soil. Woods around us, but there was a big bare area that didn't even have weeds growing in it, and that's where we built the house. And the house that you see around me right here, just the house, the structure, including the plumbing, the electrical, flooring, roofing, everything that is part of the house itself, we built for $17,000. Now that's 5.5 years ago. It was 5 years in July. It's December now. Pardon me. And how could I do that $17,000 really? I bought an ebook called The Greenwood House. And I don't remember the author, but if you Google that, you'll find it. Actually, I didn't buy it. I found a link on Mother Earth News website that you could download a free copy. He at one time sold it, and he had become, fairly successful, had good success selling the book. And as part of this article he wrote for Mother Earth, he included a link to a downloadable version of his book. And it's about building structures from unseasoned sawmill rough sawn green wood. Very doable. Everybody I talked to about it said, you're crazy, it'll warp, it'll split, it'll fall apart, you can't do that, you gotta have seasoned wood. And no, you just have to know how to build with unseasoned green wood. And this guy nailed it. And there are a lot of old forgotten tricks of the trade. Carpenters today have great knowledge of modern techniques and modern, air nailers and the things that we do today, but they lost a lot of the knowledge that the old timers had. And the book was amazing. I went to an Amish sawmill near here. I read in his book that poplar is one of the more rot-resistant, insect-resistant woods. So, and they used poplar a lot for barn siding on the old, the old gray weathered barns that are 150 years old. That's mostly poplar siding, and that's why. So I bought all poplar, and I used 2x6s for the sidewalls, and of course all the dimensional lumber is a full 2-inch by 6-inch. I used 2x10s for the floor joists, all poplar, 2x6s for the sidewalls, 2x4s for the partition walls inside, 2x6s for the roof rafters, and I built rafters, not trusses, and used 1x8 board and batten siding. And you have to allow for the shrinkage. It will shrink, so that's why the board and batten. The battens cover the seams in the boards when they shrink, and if you know how to do it, nothing split, nothing warped, nothing. I couldn't be happier. And I bought this rough sawn green unseasoned poplar for like 43 cents a board foot, something like that. And that's how you can do a house very, very cheaply. I use PEX pipe for plumbing. I was going to use copper, but it would have cost 5 times more. And I found out about PEX pipe and learned a little bit about it. That's cool stuff once you learn to use it. Everything's wired with, up to code, although where I'm at there's no building codes. But we have 20 amp outlets. Everything's wired, it's Romex. When the electric company came to tie the house in, I didn't have temporary service. I built the whole house with a generator. And then once I had it all wired and ready to go, called the power company, and they came out and set a transformer on a pole and ran wire to the house. And before they connected it, he came in and took a glance at my breaker box and double checked the ground and said we're good to go, and tied it in, and the rest is history. Now, the $17,000 I mentioned does not include the well or the septic. And they cost almost, the well was $12,000. We had to get down 400 feet for good water. The septic, I was allowed by the county to put it in myself as long as I put it into their specs. So I bought all the leach lines and the septic tank, and of course it's a tiny house, so they were maybe a little more lenient than they would be with a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house with 6 people living in it. We only have 1 bathroom, 1 kitchen sink, and So we put in one 1,000 gallon septic tank, and I had to put 400 feet of leach in, and that's because of the clay soil. And I did all that for right around 3,200, I think it was. And I had to come out and have them come out and inspect it before I could cover it up, and it passed, and I covered it, and we're good. So the well and septic were 15,000. See, 12, about almost 16,000. So anyway, we built this place very inexpensively, and I would call that a win. It's because of that we don't need a lot of income. We don't need, we don't have a lot of bills, and boy, is it freeing to get rid of all the crap. We had a big Victorian house full of antiques, and it took 5 hours to clean the house and 8 hours to clean the house when you're doing spring cleaning, and dusting all the antiques, and cleaning a spare bedroom nobody used. And it just, one day we said, we don't need this. And we had a garage sale and sold antiques for 2 weeks. And I would say just the contents of that house probably paid for half of our little homestead. And when we moved our clothes and the bed from the guest room and one end table and one sofa table. It took like, I don't know, 2 loads in a pickup truck. We bought a new couch and love seat and a new refrigerator and a new little tiny stove. And that was it, and our clothing. And it was so, you'd be amazed when you get rid of your junk and downsize, just how freeing it is. It was wonderful. But anyway, house is 540 square feet. Couldn't love it anymore. It's easy to clean, takes an hour. That's the #1 success story. Okay, successful story #2. I was using my little workshop for the brooders and the incubator and everything when we had the hatchery, and got rid of all that stuff, and thought, I really need to do something with the shop and make it productive. And I really always enjoyed the show Forged in Fire. I'm sure you've seen it, or at least heard of it. And always been a little bit fascinated with knives, especially the old Civil War knives and the D-guard knives. And so I started making a few knives. Now, of course, I didn't have any equipment. I wasn't a blacksmith. And I didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money doing it, and then, you're starting it and then discover this is another one of those epic failures and nobody buys them. And so another YouTube video, I saw videos on how to make your own forge, a coal forge, or I use wood actually a lot, and it works great. But build it out of an old semi-truck brake drum. And I think I spent $30 at a scrap metal place for a brake drum. Spent $4 for a hair dryer at Goodwill for the blower for the forge. And went to Harbor Freight, and it's not the best quality. Blacksmiths kind of laugh at them. But to get started, it worked great, and it still does. The anvil, Harbor Freight had an anvil, and I had a 30% off coupon. I think I got the anvil for like $45. So, I got into blacksmithing, knife making for $40-50. I already had a belt sander that uses a grinder with ceramic belts. and I had a bench top, regular grinding wheel grinder. I had already had a little chop saw I could put a metal blade on for cutoffs, and spent $17 at Harbor Freight for a little angle grinder that, well, it might last a couple knives. And I've made well over 100 knives, and I still have the same little angle grinder. So anyway, it was maybe $100 total, 120 to get started, to get into it. I made my own tongs, had a pair of welding gloves, and just took off and started doing it. I started off doing railroad spike knives just to learn to forge, and kind of self-taught myself and watched a lot of YouTube videos. And anyway, I've been selling knives about as fast as I can keep them made. I want to be able to relax and enjoy life a little bit at this point in my life, so I could make more, and if I made more, I think I could sell more, but I sell enough to pay a few bills here and there, and it has really, really helped out. Again, it's kind of a real success story because I sell as many as I make. So I really enjoy doing it, and so that goes in the win column. So that's success story number 2. Okay, so I moved over here because that was about ready to set my leg on fire. Back to the honeybees, which is success story number 3. And a little controversial. Any beekeepers that are watching this video are gonna just want to crucify me. But you can't argue with success, and it has become a big success story up till now. We'll see how it goes. As I said before with my epic failure, had bought all those bees. Not only did I lose what I paid for the bees, but I spent a good deal of money in treatment for varroa mites, sugar to feed them in the spring and in the fall, and that first summer we had a real drought and went into a big dearth, and there was no nectar. So everybody in the bee club advised me to feed them then. I probably bought, 100 pounds of sugar, if not more. And then the bees were all dead, so that was all lost. So I wasn't ready to give up on the bees just yet. So again, back to YouTube videos. And 2 things that I learned from watching different videos. Number 1 was catching swarms, so that you're not buying bees. If you lose them, all they cost you was your little bit of labor and a little bit of money to build swarm traps, but they're very inexpensive to build, so that wasn't bad. So I thought, well, I could get more bees and not have to buy them. That'd be a good thing. And at that point, just thought I was going to continue doing the same thing I had been doing, which, the definition, as a wise man once said, the definition of insanity is to continue to do the same thing over and over and expect different results. Well, I built some swarm traps. I think I even bought an ebook. I know I did. Bought an ebook on swarm trapping, where to place them, and it was $4 or $5, and it was well worth the investment because I had never done it before and didn't have any idea what I was doing. So anyway, per the specs in the book, I built swarm traps. I built 10, I believe, and went around to area farmers and told them what I was trying to do and asked if I could put a swarm trap. Along creeks is a good place, along railroad tracks is a good place. Bees use things to navigate. So anyway, long story short, I put out 10 swarm traps, and I put them out fairly early, like in March or so, I suppose. Then swarms typically happen in April, but I wanted to get them out and get them in place and have them ready to go when the swarm season started. So while I was, every other day or so, I would go check them and see if there was any activity, anything happening. And again, it was March. It was a little early and still kind of cold and nothing happening. And so I happened onto a YouTube video by a man by the name of Michael Bush. When you're done with this video, in fact, I should link to that in the bottom. Michael Bush has, I don't know, a lot of videos. And the man, when you hear him talk, he doesn't ramble on about stupid things like I do. This man knows his stuff. He, I believe, is, has taught college classes. He gives seminars. He has millions of reasons to not treat bees. Typically, enemies of honeybees are varroa mites, hive beetles, American foul brood, European foul brood. I spent months and months and months researching to learn about all these things, and it's good to know. But I spent a lot of money treating for them and a lot of time learning about them, and watch Michael Bush's videos. You'll believe me and you'll understand, I think. The old-time beekeepers are real sticklers to treating bees, and because they feel that if you don't treat your bees, if they survive, they become what they call mite bombs. That I'm producing mites in my hives that their bees then bring back to their hives, and when they lose their bees, it's my fault. Well, you got to blame something when you lose your bees, don't you? I quit treating. I quit feeding. I quit putting essential oils in the hives. I cleaned out all the hives of the old comb that had maybe any of the chemicals residues in them. Melted the wax down, got rid of it, extracted honey, melted the honeycombs, and got beeswax that I use for my knives, by the way. Works nice. So I started catching some swarms, and I think I caught 3 swarms fairly quick. And then one of the guys in a bee club called me. Somebody had called him wanting them to do what's called a cutout. And if you're not a beekeeper, what a cutout is when honeybees, have moved into a wall, a tree, a barn, a house wall, some kind of a structure or shelter where they aren't wanted. And so this lady had called this guy and said, would you do a cutout? And he didn't do cutouts. He asked me if I wanted to. I'd never done one. I had no idea how, knew what he meant. This was probably one of the easiest ones ever. I called the lady and, maybe I'll do it. It's a source of bees. Well, she explained to me the bees were in the banister of a house that they owned that they were going to renovate. And the bees had been in the banister of this house for 5 years. And they owned the house the whole time, but hadn't done anything with it. Now they were starting to renovate it. They were going to side it. And they needed the bees out of that banister, obviously. And they didn't want to spray them and kill them, and I'm awful glad of that. You know, the honeybees, we got to protect them. Anyway. So, back to YouTube. So I watched some YouTube videos on bee cutouts, and boy, I was nervous. But it had siding over the hive, and but it was at eye level. It wasn't up in the air where I had to be on a ladder. I could work from the ground. The siding came off real easily. The homeowner said, "We'll put the siding back. Just, you know, try to take it off without breaking it. If you break it, you break it." I got all the siding off and exposed this whole banister full of honeycomb and bees that weren't really too aggressive or horrible. Yeah, for just having their house ripped open, they weren't bad. And of course, I had a bee suit on and gloves, and as I had seen in the videos, started cutting the comb out of the wall and putting the comb on frames and rubber banding it to the frames and putting the frames in a box. And I got all these bees in, and it took 8 hours. And my goodness, was there a lot of comb, honey, and brood all in that hive. So all the brood, of course, went into the hive box that I had with me, and I got them home, and I got them put into the bee yard, and it made me really get thinking. Those bees had been in that banister 5 years. Nobody treated them. Nobody fed them. Nobody worried about them. Nobody fussed over them. Nobody spent money on them. Nobody did anything, and they did just fine. So I did a second cutout 2 weeks after that or so. It was in a barn wall behind. A man had a workshop in his barn and had a wall with pegboard, and the bees were behind the pegboard in the wall between the pegboard and the barn siding, and he knew it, and they had been there 4 years, and they didn't bother him any. He knew they were there. He left them alone, just let them go. Well, the problem was the hive had grown so big, had so much honey in it, it was starting to push the pegboard in. The bees had actually propolised over all the holes in the pegboard, and but it was starting to push the pegboard into his shop, and which had opened a little opening. Now some of the bees were starting to come into his shop, so now they were a problem. Needed them out of there. Same process. I cut them out, brought them home, got them in a hive, and thought same thing. They've been in there 3 years, 4 years. I think he said 4 years. No treatment, no feeding. They did fine. So the idea is I can split these hives and develop the genetics of those bees. Those bees survive just fine. Again, Michael Bush's videos kind of explains the advantage, and I believe he talked about in Africa, I believe, was the first that the varroa mite came to be a problem. And a bunch of beekeepers came together and said, what are we going to do about this? And basically, none of them had any money. They were broke. It's like, we can't afford to do anything. What are we going to do? We won't do anything. Within 3 years, the varroa mites were gone. Here in the United States, somehow they got here. Beekeepers decided we needed to treat for this. So we treated for it. And what we've done is develop a genetic line of honeybees that depend on being treated. They're not strong enough to fight off the varroa mites and the problems that the hives have. So, I've got now 11 hives. I did the 2 cutouts. I think I caught a total of 5 swarms. 7. I must have caught 6 swarms. 6 swarms and 2 cutouts gave me 8. The hives were so full and so thriving and doing so well, I was able to split a couple of those. And going into winter, I had 11 hives, all thriving and all doing well. Now we'll see. I hope, come spring, I don't find a bunch of dead bees in the hive. But it can't be any worse than the first attempt. So, but the point being, because these, well, the 2 cutouts and a couple of swarms were so big, when I did those splits, I had 3 honey supers on some of those because they were so huge. The cutouts that I did, the one in the barn, the hive that those bees were in covered the backside of 2 4x8 sheets of pegboard. So you're talking 65 square feet of honeycomb and brood comb, and so the hives were just huge. So when I brought them home, I put them in, I stacked 5 supers, or five hive bodies and 2 or 3 honey supers on the top. And so anyway, I was able to get 50 pounds of honey. Now, part of that honey, when I say 50 pounds, probably 30 pounds of that came from honey that I got out of those cutouts. When I cut the honeycomb out of the wall, I harvested that honey. So I had 50 pounds of honey. Honey here in this area sells for about $8 a pound. So I had $4,000 worth of honey, and plenty of honey, and I made sure plenty of honey in all those hives for those bees to have honey for the winter. There's probably 80 to 100 pounds of honey still in every hive. So there's $4,000 worth of honey that we had for farmers markets, and sell here from the homestead, and sell at work. And I've retired now, so I don't have that market anymore. But between making knives and selling honey, that supplements the retirement income a good bit, and are both big success stories. So anyway, if you're not a beekeeper, probably none of that interested you, or maybe you're thinking about getting into bees, so look at Michael Bush's videos if you're thinking of it. If you're not interested in honeybees, I just bored you to death, but it just shows that, if you try enough things, sooner or later, you'll find the things that work, and stop doing the things that don't work. We're going to get chickens again in the spring, but we're only going to get 3 or 4 or 5, enough for eggs for just us, and maybe a few for our daughters here and there. Although one of my daughters has her own chickens. I won't be hatching any more eggs. I won't be feeding a rooster. I don't need a rooster if I'm not worried about hatching eggs. Feed bill will be 10% of what it was, and we'll have our own good fresh eggs. We also last year, another success story, we raised, we did 25 meat birds, Cornish, and they're in the freezer. Another success story. I put in solar. I have 6 solar panels for a total of about 1,000 watts. It isn't near enough for us to be off grid. We don't want to be off grid. I like taking a good hot shower, and we're all electric, so hot water here is electric, and the pump's 400 feet deep, so it can't run off solar. But it does supplement. We run the TV and the refrigerator and some lights in the house, and it's a TV, computer, refrigerator, and some table lights off the solar. And the freezer's in the shop, and it's not on solar, but if the power goes out, it can be plugged into solar. And I would probably, just to conserve, we can run the refrigerator and the freezer only. That way, you know, we won't lose any food. We could survive for months without power if we had to. Another little success story, we put in a rainwater collection tank. Because we can't use the pump, I put in a 200-gallon tank and we collect rainwater off the roof, and I have it filtered, and, you know, to be safe, if we were going to drink it, we could boil it. So, you know, we can survive here. We have enough power to preserve the food. We could, you know, still run the computer if we needed to communicate or charge cell phones with the solar. Even without having the pump available, we have a source of water with the rainwater collection. I'd feel better if we had the chickens now for eggs, but we'll have them in the spring. So, you know, those are all things that have worked for us and worked well. And one more project that I have just begun. Don't know if it'll be in the success column yet or not, but there's a little pond here on the property. I mentioned at the beginning of the video, a little strip mine pond. Never had any fish in it, and I just kind of thought the water probably wouldn't support fish. It probably is acidic from, you know, the acid runoff from the old mines. But I had it tested, and it's not, and it will support fish. And I talked to Fender's Fish Hatchery, which is in Bolduc, Ohio, and they tested the water for me and said it's great, it'll support fish. And probably the reason there's no fish in it is because of winter kill, which is from the pond freezing over and no oxygen in the water. So he suggested put an aerator in it. I just did a video, I'll link to that. On building a little dock, and the installing the aerator, which is running. There's no fish in it yet. I put some minnows in just to see, maybe they'll supply food for the fish in the spring when I do stock it. We're going to stock it with bass and bluegill and hybrid bluegill and what they call shell crackers, which is a red-eared sunfish. That's at the advice of Steve from Fender's Hatchery, Fender's Fish Hatchery. So anyway, we'll have fish here on the homestead. I hope that's another success story. So we'll see. Check back for other videos in the spring when I stock it. There will be a video on that. Thanks for watching the videos. I hope I haven't rambled too much here, but good luck on your homestead. Don't give it up. Try the things that work and quit doing the things that don't work. You'll find a niche, and it'll pay off in the long run. And happy homesteading.